of almost 2D and stick it in there and sort of marry that up with the impacts to really spell that out. And the last little thing that we threw in was the rune. So the point of the rune is to sort of pull it all together, get a little taste of that other vibe we were shooting for, but also to sort of frame an area on which the action takes place. So we haven't just been working on the monk. We've also been working on some upgrades to the other heroes, so sort of a makeover, if you will, to a number of skills. So I'm going to walk you through a number of those makeovers that we've worked on. So first up is Witch Doctor's Spider Totem, which we showed at last year's BlizzCon. And it was pretty cool, but the thing is, we felt that the look of it was just a little bit too noisy. You laid it down, and in the middle of combat, it's just buzzy, and you can't really figure out what's going on. And the other thing about it was we weren't too crazy about the totem thematic. We didn't feel that really was really driving the Witch Doctor dark theme home. So we made some changes to it. We've renamed it Carrion Spiders. And the other thing is we decided, well, if a lot of little spiders is cool but can't read really well, then we'll switch that around and we'll make it fewer spiders, but we'll make them huge. And huge spiders are definitely creepy. And then instead of a totem, we decided to aim squarely for the zombie thematic and have those spiders actually get emitted from a zombie corpse that you raise from the floor. Next up in the makeover department is the wizard. So last year we showed you Stone Skin, which is a defensive ability. This worked really well, but it was really difficult to read. She's a kind of a spindly shaped character, and there wasn't enough surface area to really get the idea what she was made out of when she switched. So the other big problem with it, though, the one that the artist really had, was it didn't really underscore our goal of making the wizard a light show. So here we have the new Stone Skin look. And we aim for a bright crystalline kind of feel, something that would glow and light up, and something that you just couldn't possibly miss. So it's got a much easier read, and now that we've seen it like this and we like it, we're thinking it's probably going to need a new name, which we haven't thought of yet. So onto the Barbarian. Done a lot of upgrades to Whirlwind along the way. That's a good screensaver. So we showed you Whirlwind originally at WWI in Paris when we announced, and this is what it looked like. And we thought we were pretty happy with it at that time. We thought, okay, that looks like a whirlwind. It's cool, But then what happened along the way this year was we started working on a new monster called the Dune Dervish, which is a desert monster, and he also has a different kind of whirlwind attack, but a whirlwind attack nonetheless. And it looks like this. And the problem that we had with this was when we unleashed this onto the team, the comment that was made was, how come the Dune Dervish whirlwind is better than the Barbarian? And this kind of thing happens a lot, where one thing comes into the game and kind of one-ups the thing that we just made. So we were like, the effects artists were a little hurt by that, and we went back to the drawing board and we decided, well, all right, it's a fair comment. Let's do something about this. And so here's the new version of Whirlwind. It's a lot thicker. There's a lot more going on. We've added actually more copies of the Barbarian in there, lots of different flying weapons, and a whole lot of more dust. So now, that may not be impressive enough, so I prepared a little demonstration to prove just how much more powerful the new Whirlwind actually is. So yes, you can decimate farm animals with it.
All right, so there's your cow level. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other systems design we've done on some of the other heroes. And the first thing is Fury, which is the resource system that we use for the Barbarian. Resource system is what we refer to pretty much anything like mana or Fury that fuels and changes up the gameplay for different classes. And one of our goals on Diablo 3 is to try to do a unique system for each class. And we may not accomplish that. We may default back to mana for some. But definitely at least one class will use mana, but hopefully all the others use something different. So we showed Fury last year, but we weren't quite happy with it. So the idea was, with the Barbarian, we really wanted him to feel like he was building up, like he was getting angry and going berserk. I'm a big fan of the Hulk, so I wanted him to Hulk out. So the first thing we tried was very similar to Rage in World of Warcraft on the Warrior, where any kind of damage he did would just build up this resource that he'd use to spend on his skills. And the problem was we didn't initially like this because it felt like we were always waiting around. Like we wanted to spam our skills. We wanted to, throw out leap attacks and seismic slams like crazy. We didn't want to kind of have to hit a dude 10 times to finally be able to do something cool. So we tried something different, which was more of a damage increasing system. And the concept here kind of shows that idea when we really kind of filled it out, that the more Fury you had, the more damage you did, but it didn't actually affect your skills at all. And it was all right. It's always cool to do more damage, but it didn't change the way the Barbarian played in any way. And that's really important. That the whole point of these systems is to make the classes play a little differently so that they're interesting. So when you re-roll a different class, it's not the exact same mechanics. So what we finally decided to do was go back to the idea of a resource system, but tune it for Diablo. We'd really been taking the wrong approach. We'd probably been tuning it more like World of Warcraft, and our pace of gameplay is just way faster. So what we did was we had this idea of endless Fury. And so this video hopefully will start up in a moment. And maybe not. So if this video was going, which would be totally awesome, it's filled with crazy explosions, the greatest video ever made, really, I promise you. You'd be seeing like the Barbarian can essentially just recycle his Fury so fast that while he's hitting dudes with leap attacks or seismic slams and stuff like that, if he hits a lot of targets, he generates a lot of Fury, and he can just instantly do another skill again. But if he wastes like a really big AoE skill on one dude, then he wastes a lot of his Fury, and then he has to kind of start over a little bit. It's a really fast-paced system. It doesn't kind of get in the way of his fun and hold him back, but it does make him think about what he's going to hit and what skill he's going to use on what type of monsters. And that makes it a lot more fun to play him. So the next thing we're going to talk a little bit about is runes. We showed runes last year, and for those of you who maybe didn't see or read an article about it, the idea for runes was that they're these items you find in the world, you socket them in your skills and change what your skill does. So you could say take something like lightning and turn it into chain lightning, or set it up so that when you kill guys with it, they explode in giant lightning, crazy light show. That's awesome. So if any of you've played the demo, you've probably noticed there's no runes in it. So the question is, where are they? So what we wanted to say was, we wanted to talk about them a little bit, tell you runes aren't going anywhere. They're a really important system to us. One of our main goals for Diablo 3 is an extremely high level of customization for your characters, and runes are one of our core systems that we decided to make because we really wanted to support that goal. So they aren't going anywhere, but I'm going to explain to you why they're not in our build. So this is our skill and rune creation process. I'm going to fly through it because it's boring production stuff. So we have a skill idea, could come from anywhere. We design the skill, usually write some kind of awesome design doc filled with crazy words. We storyboard it. We don't do this for every skill, but signature skills will create some imagery that supports it and says this is what the skill's supposed to look like. Then we program it. Then design tests the kind of early programmed version, which doesn't have final art, decides, is this cool? We do a lot of tuning and testing and changes and things like that. Then we add effects. Then we design runes, once we've actually gotten the skill through this whole process. After we design the runes, we program them, then we do the effects for them. If any of these kind of first 6 items on here change at all, and those of you who know Blizzard games know we like to change stuff all the time, then all of our rune work is gone. So what when we're developing skills, what we try to do is save all the rune work for last. We've blocked off a ginormous amount of time for it, so we're definitely going to be doing them. And there's actually a lot of runes in the game right now, but they're so hit or miss within the characters, it's kind of disorienting. Why does this skill have a rune and this one doesn't? So we just decided to disable them as a whole until people could play the system in its entirety. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the monsters that we developed in the last year and for our BlizzCon demo. This is just kind of a nice, cool little montage that shows off some of the different creatures that you'll encounter if you go and play what we're showing today. So I'm going to talk about our monster design philosophy and how we design monsters for Diablo. So the first thing that we kind of learned in the development of Diablo monsters is that they work best when they're simple. Most of our monsters live for 3, maybe 5 seconds. And when you put kind of crazy group behavior AI or squad level stuff or give a guy 5 skills, likely the player's only going to see a piece of that before the creature dies. And it actually just makes the creature look kind of confused and weird. It doesn't really work. So the monsters actually tend to work best when we make them kind of straightforward and simple, give them one job and have them do that job well. So the question is, how do we create combat that's got a lot of depth out of just these very simple monsters? And the answer is complexity and depth comes from combining different monster types together. And this is really the philosophy that all the Diablo games have followed and that we've just kind of taken up and inherited from our previous titles. So one of the key things here is this means we put a lot of different monsters on screen. We put 3, 4, 5 different monster types on screen at once. And sometimes knowing which monster is which and which one you want to kill first is really critical gameplay. We call it target identification. It's absolutely essential. So identifying monsters quickly is very important. And then we have this idea that you should always be introducing new monsters. Diablo monsters work best when they're simple. That means that if you fight the same monster over and over again for a couple hours, he can get a little dull. So always be introducing something new that is interesting for the player. So this is a good example of harking back to Diablo 2, how they use shape and color for target identification. Diablo 2 did, and the original Diablo did an amazing job of creating a lot of different profiles. In every area you go into, the monsters in those areas have different shapes and different colors that are very complementary to one another. And then here's some examples of some creatures from Diablo 3 that appear in the same area and how we use the same ideas of shape, profile, and color so that you can easily identify them from one another. All right. So I'm going to go really quickly through some of our archetypes, because the next thing we do is we go for every area, we say, well, we need 4 or 5 monsters for this area, and we have probably about 100 monsters planned for the game as a whole. Don't quote me on that, but it's a rough number. And it's really important. So a lot of these monsters repeat function, even if they have different ideas or different abilities. And so we archetype those functions. So the first one we call is a swarmer. Fighting tons and tons of dudes that die really easy is super fun, and that's what these guys' jobs are. Most of them are melee characters, most of them are really weak, but they're also really good to provide kind of a health wall so that more interesting or more complex monsters can interact with them. Ranged creatures, which are kind of our stock most threatening thing we can put out there. I mean, certainly we can put a boss or something bigger, but ranged creatures, because they don't have to move towards you, they can all attack you at once, tend to be pretty dangerous. Lieutenants, which do things like resurrect enemies and buff them and spawn. These are typically not placed in high numbers, but they're put in to be kind of this high priority target that you want to go after. Elites are basically meant to make you kind of pause for a second and encounter something that takes more than a couple hits to kill, or maybe has a really high damage attack. They are kind of again a focus, like a target that has a very high priority to it. But unlike the lieutenant, they're often a little bit scarier. You have to, you can't just run straight into them every time. So an AoE character, or what we sometimes call area of denial characters, because a lot of their job is to change the play space. I'm going to set the ground on fire underneath you, and now you don't want to stand there anymore. So when the player has to kind of react like that, it's interesting gameplay. So weakeners are kind of like lieutenants in that they're